So no joke, this is literally my second viewing of American Psycho, which I watched last night as of this recording. The first time I saw it was last year. I think it might have been October of last year, 2025, but for some reason I never got around to reviewing it back then. But thanks to one of you guys sending me a video from this guy I like to follow on Instagram, E-Rock, who is a big Philly sports fan, was lip-syncing to some audio from American Psycho. Okay, fine, I can take a hint. I guess my first official review of 2026, American Psycho, starring Christian Bale, Jared Leto, Josh Lucas, and Willem Dafoe. Oh, yeah, and Reese Witherspoon. I keep forgetting she's in this. No synopsis necessary, but it's basically about Patrick Bateman, who's an investment banker in New York, and a serial killer by night, who does some pretty brutally messed up murders. And that's an understatement.
Although originally polarizing to audiences and critics alike, it developed a much-deserved cult following when released on digital video disc, or DVD. There it found a second life, and really came into its own commercially and artistically.
I've seen other people on here review this movie, so I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it justice by adding anything new to the table. But as far as my experience watching this is the second time, like I said, I saw it last night. I don't know if this is really for me, although I am finding myself quoting it a couple times, particularly I have to return some videotapes. But I totally understand its appeal. It's basically a satire or a black comedy, a dark comedy, where you see Christian Bale or Patrick Bateman do these really horrible things, but they portray it in a very interestingly comedic way, although it's pretty clear, and the movie does not shy away from showing just how messed up this guy is. And it's really interesting to think about that they didn't initially want Christian Bale for this part. There were various actors that were considering the part, from Johnny Depp to Brad Pitt and Leonardo DiCaprio. And the director, Mary Herron, had to fight tooth and nail with the studio execs to get Christian Bale to come onto the project. This is also based off of a novel by Bret Easton Ellis from 1991. Now, I'm not a reader, so I obviously don't know how closely this does follow the book. If there's anybody out there watching this who has read the book, you can tell me down below. But honestly, this was kind of a jarring experience for me, and not in a bad way. I'm so used to seeing Christian Bale as Batman, Bruce Wayne, Dickie Eklund in The Fighter, Irving in American Hustle. This is probably the most unique character Bale has ever played. This is not someone that you're supposed to feel sorry for. The way the film portrays it, it kind of has a way of drawing the audience in to make you understand this guy's mindset. And other movies have done this, but at least in my experience, I kind of feel slightly off my rocker while I watch this. The moment Patrick Bateman starts to do and say certain things, and he starts to actually kill people, it's done in a way where it's entertaining and kind of funny, but also mixed in with the feeling of, this guy is out of his mind. The most notable example is the famous scene where he kills Jared Leto's character, Paul Allen. Yeah, just to get the obvious out of the way, Batman killed the Joker. And he's being questioned by Norman Osborn, the Green Goblin. That scene was also parodied by Huey Lewis, whose song is playing in the background, Hip to Be Square, which, believe it or not, I first heard as a parody on Sesame Street, Hip to Be a Square.
It's hip to be a square. Hip, so hip to be. It's hip to be a square. Hip, so hip to be a square. It's hip to be a square. Hip.
Do you have a chow or something? No, Alan. Is that a raincoat? Yes, it is. That, along with throwing the chainsaw at the prostitute as she's running down the stairs, is probably the most violent he ever gets with anybody. But there's even a few times where he backs out of killing someone. Either he's too repulsed by someone's perception of what he's doing, or he gets a message on his answering machine that throws off the entire mood of what he's gonna do. He's getting ready to kill his one secretary with a nail gun to the back of her head, but then the woman he's having an affair with calls and leaves a message, basically killing the mood, forcing her to leave. If anyone else were to direct that moment, you'd actually feel, I guess, some sort of sympathy for Patrick Bateman. But in this movie, I've realized, and I had to learn this the hard way in my own naive way, you're not really meant to feel sorry for Patrick Bateman, because like with everybody else in here, they're just so self-absorbed and so vapid. They're totally oblivious to everything that's going on around them. It's like, even if they do know, they don't even care. And a lot of the inner monologue that's given by Patrick Bateman is very insightful and yet not entirely wrong based on how all of these people act. And he should know because he's in this culture every day. I know this is a stereotype, but I tend to think that a good amount of people in the Wall Street scene or the wealthy elite probably not too far off from how this movie portrays it. Now, obviously, this is a piece of fiction. You can't take it too seriously, but we hear stories about how rich people tend to go crazy with certain situations and how they spend their money. Maybe not the killing part or anything. What I'm trying to say is that the crazy stuff that they do some of the time in here, I would not be shocked if a lot of rich people in the world do the same stuff. Another modern example that comes to mind is Wolf of Wall Street, which is similar to American Psycho in one specific way where Jordan Belfort gives the inner monologue to the audience. And with Willem Dafoe's character, the private investigator looking into the disappearance of Paul Allen, heightens more suspense for Patrick Bateman as his nighttime endeavors are starting to creep into his everyday routine. And he starts to realize that the walls might be closing in and he eventually is going to be caught by the authorities. It all eventually comes to a head when he confesses everything that he's done over the phone to his lawyer, or so he believes he does. Everybody else has talked about it, but when that reveal first came up, I managed to somehow stay away from all the spoilers, but I thought in my mind somehow that he was going to get caught. But then it turns out that the lawyer took it as a joke, and it hints that this is probably not the first time that he's made a call like this. That Paul Allen's actually still alive. Patrick Bateman's real name might not be who he says he is. And even after the movie ends, it's not really clear if this is all up in his head or if any of this really did happen. I'm tempted to say it's probably a mix of both. Because in certain situations when he's arguing with the cleaning lady at the dry cleaner, he threatens to kill her. She's obviously horrified, but her husband doesn't really react. So it makes me wonder, looking at the movie again with this knowledge in mind, okay, he probably wishes he would have said that to her, but he also doesn't want to cause a bigger fuss than he already is causing. And when he goes on his supposed killing spree, blowing up a cop car, you would think that almost every single cop in Manhattan would be swarming him by now. And he basically is shooting people at point blank range, including a security guard. Nobody else really seems to react. And when the prostitute runs away after she sees him killing that other woman in bed, there's bound to be at least some people in the building that would hear her screaming. I was also surprised to see how limited Willem Dafoe's part is. I kind of expected him to be more involved throughout the plot, but in the scenes that we do get with him, he's surprisingly very tame and calm. And that's the opposite of what I usually see from Dafoe. I mean, he's notorious for playing bad guys or just crazy people. All for you, Norman. I mean, obviously, this is not the first time he's played a character like this, but I do like seeing this side of him, and it's actually kind of refreshing. Reese Witherspoon is also around as Patrick Bateman's fiancée. She doesn't really have much to do with anything. Maybe a couple of pivotal scenes where Patrick starts to walk away from her because he's afraid he's going to get caught. Also being clear that he despises her and doesn't want anything to do with her. Because she, like with everybody else in their social circle, is so vapid and self-absorbed and prissy. Well, at least a lot of the women in this one are prissy. Kind of. It's easy for me to say that because of Legally Blonde. I know. And this was actually right around the time that movie came out. This movie came out a year prior to that. But also, that's another thing I really like seeing is that the aesthetic feels and looks exactly like the 1980s, even though this came out in the year 2000. The satire, I think, is still relevant for back then as it is now. We know more about how rich people get away with certain stuff, but the commentary, as I mentioned by Patrick Bateman, it all makes it seem in a way kind of timeless, which I think is one of the reasons why this has managed to become a cult classic. Again, it's not exactly my kind of movie, but I certainly understand the appeal. There's a certain type of crispness in the entire picture, and it almost kind of feels like a novelty of a movie. I mean, it really is a novelty, even though it's a pretty big staple in pop culture. And there's a sense of authorship that Mary Harron is able to bring with her direction and how it feels very much like her own project and it's not being tampered with by other people. Now, if any of you watched me for a while, I'm not one of those people who says that studio has to let the creators do whatever they want, because at some point you need some checks and balances. But in this case, I'd say it worked out in his favor. I probably mentioned this before. My brain's kind of mush right now. I think some of the stuff happened that Patrick Bateman did, but I also think some of it was all up in his head. And I know I'm not the only one to say that. And obviously, this guy is messed up, so he might have some sort of severe mental illness. And during a time where mental illness was not taken as seriously in the broad spectrum of society, people would just kind of write him off as someone who is desperately seeking attention. He's stuck in that endless cycle of his mind for the rest of his life, which I guess in a way is kind of sad, but in the case of Patrick Bateman,
No.
there's even certain YouTubers out there in the past that have idolized Patrick Bateman. I don't know what dark place they've had to tap into in their minds to get to that point. Excuse me, but that is fucked up. Beyond fucked up.
You know, he's certainly somebody that I wouldn't want to be at a table with and eating, but I'd certainly want to eavesdrop on his conversation. I could never really view him just as a villain because he's so ridiculous. You laugh at him, you know, never with him.
So yeah, American Psycho I can safely say is a pretty good movie. Not exactly my kind of entertainment, but I understand its appeal. And it is kind of growing on me a little bit in the sense of having some sort of lines that I could quote with certain people, such as returning some videotapes. Almost like a lightning in a bottle type of situation. So yeah, that's all I have for you guys on American Psycho. Thank you so much for watching. Comment below and tell me what your thoughts are on this movie. If you'd like to see more from me, just hit like and subscribe. Stay tuned for more reviews coming soon, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Later.